It is another Friday morning, and I'm here to bring you another Thursday Night Football recap. So the Rams played the Seahawks. It was in Seattle, so tough draw for the Rams. Seattle's always a tough place to play, no matter how good or bad the team is. And the team's pretty good this year, but it was a really good game. Last Thursday, we saw a really fun, entertaining game between the Eagles and the Packers, and this week this week even more so. I thought this was a one up on last week. I felt like, and it was a very entertaining game. It was back and forth, and the Rams scored, the Seahawks would come back and score, and it kind of went like that for most of the first half. Russell Wilson had another great game. He had to bring the team back from behind a lot because the Rams scored first. Then the Seahawks came back to score, and so on and so forth. But the Seahawks were behind the eight ball for most of the game. Jared Goff and this Rams offense were doing a really good job for most of the game, moving the ball in the Seattle defense. And if I'm Seattle, I'm starting to get a little concerned about that defense because the Rams offense hadn't been looking that sharp to start this season, and they moved the ball at will on them. Save for like one or two drives. One of the drives, the Rams were started at like the 1 yard line, and Seattle got a stop there. And then the fourth quarter, a Rams receiver couldn't catch a football, and it got deflected and intercepted. But we'll talk about that play more in depth a little later. But yeah, Seattle's defense isn't looking too sharp to start this season, and this was against a Rams offense that was looking pretty stoppable coming into this game, and they just couldn't stop them. There were some plays at the end that I really thought greatly affected the outcome of this game. And we'll just go ahead and address it right now. The roughing the passer penalty on Clay Matthews was, I don't want to say it was a bad call, but it was borderline. I don't think it was roughing the passer. Did he hit him hard? Yes, but was it a late hit? I didn't think so. He also didn't hit Russell Wilson in the head. It was shoulder-to-shoulder contact. It was a pretty hard hit, and I could see why in a fast-paced game in that moment, I could see why the officials would throw the flag, I guess. But I mean, Rams fans are going to be pissed off because I don't think that was roughing the passer. From my perspective, it was a perfectly clean hit. It was a hard hit, but it was perfectly clean. And if he makes that hit on a wide receiver going up to catch the ball, I don't think that gets called. But yeah, that was a huge play in the game because it was on third down, I think, and it gave Seattle a new set of downs, which they would eventually go on to score what would be the game-winning touchdown. So that was a big play. And then the next drive, Jared Goff and Jared Goff's wide receivers just straight up forgot how to catch a football. That's basically what happened. Cooper Kupp dropped one in the flat on the sidelines, and Everett had the ball go right through his hands, and Tedrick Thompson made a fantastic play to intercept the ball. He just got his hand underneath it to prevent it from hitting the turf. He bobbles it up to himself, and he makes the catch. And it was called incomplete initially, but Seattle challenged it because it was just before the 2-minute warning. Seattle challenged that it wasn't an incomplete pass, that was an interception, and they won it. They got the turnover, and that was a big play in the game. I don't think it was as big as the roughing the passer call on Clay Matthews because the Rams did get the ball back. But that was a pretty big play because, Everett's open coming up the slant, and if he makes that catch, he's got a lot of room to run. That was a big play, and in hindsight, knowing what eventually happened, it probably did cost him the game. But how the game actually did end, the Rams forced the 3-and-out on Seattle on defense, and they got the ball back with about a minute 48, I think it was, with no timeouts left, and Seattle special teams had pinned them pretty deep into their own territory. Their starting field position for the last drive, I think, was around the 10-yard line. So the Rams, with no timeouts, had to go about 50 or 60 yards to get into Zuerlein's field goal range, and they did. The Rams did pretty much what they had been doing all night on the Seattle defense, and they moved the ball forward, and they got well into Zuerlein's field goal range. They got him about a 44-yard field goal attempt with 11 seconds to go, I think, and Greg Zuerlein misses the kick wide right, and the Seattle Seahawks win the game. And I was happy about it because I actually picked the Seahawks to win this game, and that is my first successful Thursday night prediction of the season. So I'm feeling pretty good this morning, but that's a devastating way to lose a game for the Rams against a divisional opponent. That's about all I have to say about this game. There's some controversy involved, and a 2-minute drive to get into field goal position to win the game, and Zuerlein misses the kick, which is surprising. That is surprising because Greg Zuerlein is usually a pretty reliable kicker. He's been great for the Rams ever since he got there, but man, he missed it by that much too. Like, it was really close. He just needed that ball to curl in just about a foot, and he probably wins the game, but it never did, and it just went that much wide of the upright, and that stings. That really stings. The Rams fans are going to be feeling this one for the next couple weeks, I feel like. But let me know what you thought of this Thursday night thriller in the comments below. And without further ado, let's get into predicting the rest of these Sunday football games. Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to another Sunday and Monday football predictions episode. We got a lot of good games coming up, so we're just going to dive right into them. But first, we got two more teams on the bye this week. One of them are the Dolphins, which, thank God, they come back against the Redskins. That should be fun. And also the Lions are on the bye, who officially have my attention. They've been surprising me this season, and the first two wins I've been chalking up to luck or the incompetence of the other team. But they did pretty well last week against the Chiefs, and I have to give them credit. They looked good against the Chiefs, and they easily could have won that game if their defense could just make one more stop, but they did not. But still, 2-1-1. You gotta close that game out against the Cardinals, but we could be having a totally different conversation if that's the case. But those are the byes coming up for this week, and we have games to talk about, so we're just gonna go ahead and start talking about these games, starting with the New Jersey Jets taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Jets are coming off the bye. Bad news is it doesn't look like Sam Darnold's gonna be playing this week. It was looking like he might at one point,
But the good news is you didn't lose last week. The Eagles, on the other hand, though, are coming off a really big win against the Packers last Thursday night, and it was a win that probably saved their season. And if Deshaun Jackson comes back into the fold this week, then this is shaping up to be a pretty big game for Carson Wentz. My only complaint about the Eagles is that their defense has been a little shoddy, but it's a moot point if Darnold doesn't play.
It's like a cow's opinion. It just doesn't matter. It's moo.
I'm picking the Eagles. Next up, we have the Jaguars taking on the Carolina Panthers. The battle of two overachieving backup quarterbacks is upon us as Kyle Allen faces off against Gardner Minshew. Kyle Allen's Panthers just edged out the Texans last week, and Gardner Minshew led his Jaguars to a comeback victory in Mile High against the Broncos. I'm still not sold on Kyle Allen just yet. I mean, he hasn't been bad, but his numbers don't necessarily jump out at you. He followed up that 4-touchdown performance in Arizona with a no-touchdown performance last week against Houston. Also, what the hell was with that white jersey with the black pants? That looked awful. Never do that again, Carolina. He didn't throw any interceptions, though, which is good, so he's not costing his team games. Gardner Minshew, however, appears to be getting better every week, and I've been more and more impressed of him every game I've seen him play. And I still think, I said this at the beginning of the season, I still think this Panther offense lacks the playmakers in the passing game to really pose much of a threat to any team, much less make the playoffs. And now you got Chris Hogan going on IR this week, and that wide receiving group is even more depleted. Christian McCaffrey continues to carry this offense. This offense runs exclusively through him at this point. But I'm going to go with my gut here, and I'm going to say the Jags win another one. But I think it'll be close, and I won't be surprised if the Panthers steal a win here. Next up, we got the Vikings on the road to take on the Giants. The Daniel Jones story has been a phenomenal one through 2 games. He led a come-from-behind win in his first start against Tampa Bay. Then he carved up the Redskins for breakfast last week. It's truly been something special. Unfortunately, though, I think he's going to come back down to earth in this game, where he will be by far facing the best defense he's had to face so far. The Vikings are one of the best defenses in the league right now. They're up there with the Bills, the Patriots, and the Bears, I think. Whereas the Giants are one of the worst defenses in the league right now, if not the worst. And this is a Vikings offense that has Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook still running like a madman through the first 4 weeks. The bright side for the Giants is that Golden Tate comes back from suspension this week, so Daniel Jones will have another big weapon back in the passing game to throw to. This Giants offense has no shortage of big playmakers, even in the absence of Saquon Barkley, so I don't think this is a game that you can necessarily look past if you're the Minnesota Vikings, and we saw what happened to them last week when they looked past the Buffalo Bills. But as long as the Giants' defense continues to be as bad as it was through the first couple games, I don't see them really posing much of a threat to teams like the Vikings, and the Vikings defense is just next level. I'm going with them to win this game. Next up, we got the Falcons at the Texans. Falcons, what the hell are you doing? With all the weapons you have on offense, how can you look so uninspired and so vanilla week after week? You get behind in games and you show absolutely no fight whatsoever. You got down to the Titans last week, and you just completely rolled over. There's no mental toughness on this squad whatsoever. This team is completely lacking in confidence. Not to let the Texans off the hook either. You lost 16-10 to Kyle Allen and the Panthers. Both of these teams are coming off some pretty tough losses, and both of these teams are really puzzling to me. The Texans are lucky that the Colts lost last week, otherwise they'd be second in the division right now. It's a really weird division right now. All those teams, the Texans, the Titans, the Colts, and the Jaguars, they're all tied at 2-2. I've never seen that happen before. I don't think that remains the case. I think the Titans and the Jaguars probably too are going to start to fall back as the season gets going. But it's a weird time in the NFL for sure. As for this game, though, I think the Texans are going to win because the Falcons have not shown me anything that makes me believe in them as a squad anymore. They get down by a touchdown or two, and the game is over at that point. And given how they've played the last two games, I wouldn't be surprised if their season just falls apart from here and they finish around 6-10. Next up, we have a big divisional matchup between the Buccaneers and the Saints. I wouldn't have circled this game on my calendar at the beginning of the season as one of the big games, but here we are. The Bucs are 2-2, and the Saints are trying to hang on to the division while Drew Brees continues to recover from his hand surgery. I still have no idea how the Bucs were able to put up 50 points against the LA Rams last week. The week after they lost to Daniel Jones in his first career start. Like, seriously, how does that happen? But you're in a position now where you could be tied for the division if you manage to knock off the Saints. But the Saints are doing pretty well for themselves in the absence of Mr. Brees. They're 2-0 with Teddy Water under the bridge, and they have a good shot at going 3-0 in this game. I do like Tampa's pass rush. Shaq Barrett has been brutalizing quarterbacks and offensive linemen alike. Ndamukong Suh did a thing last week. He returned a fumble for the game-clinching touchdown against the Rams. But I think the Saints will win this game. I mean, I picked against them twice against better teams than the Bucs, and they proved me wrong both times. So I'm going to pick them to win in this game. Next, that brings us to the Bills heading to Nashville to take on the Tennessee Titans. The Bills took a tough loss last week against the Patriots, and a game that I really think the Bills could have and should have won. Nonetheless, the Bills are still 3-1, and last week's loss doesn't really damage their playoff chances. But now they have to bounce back and find a way to go 4-1 heading into their bye week. And I do think this is a winnable game for the Bills, but it's going to be a step up in competition from, say, the Cincinnatis and the Giants of the league. The Bills may be without Josh Allen for this game, which is not ideal. He's in concussion protocol, and as of recording this, he has not cleared concussion protocol, and it is now Friday. But practice hasn't happened yet, so we'll keep an eye on that. If he isn't cleared to play, then Buffalo will be relying on backup quarterback Matt Barkley to take the reins at quarterback in this game. And I don't think Matt Barkley is a bad backup quarterback. He's played well when called upon for this team. I think with his experience, he's a bit cooler under pressure and won't make the potential killer mistake that Allen has been prone to at times. That being said, though, it does take away an element of Buffalo's offense having Josh Allen out there. They won't be calling any designed QB runs for Matt Barkley. Matt Barkley isn't going to be eluding tacklers and making plays with his legs like Josh Allen has. I think this could be another low-scoring game. I think it's a low-scoring game regardless of who plays quarterback, but Buffalo's defense showed once again and once and for all that they are for real. If there was any doubt going into last week's game that Buffalo's defense is real, there shouldn't be any more. But credit to the Titans, I think they have the most underrated defense in the league right now. They have a really good pass rush, and I really like their secondary. But I am still not a believer in Marcus Mariota. I think they have good playmakers on offense like Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, but Buffalo has had no problem this season shutting down a team's top playmaker and getting good pressure on quarterbacks. They haven't been getting many sacks, but they have been getting into the backfield and making life uncomfortable for quarterbacks. And Mariota has shown that he does not hold up very well under pressure like that, evidenced of the Jacksonville game 3 Thursdays ago now. So I think the Bills have a very good chance of winning this game, and I'm going to pick them again. I'm going to stay faithful, and I'm going to pick that the Bills bounce back. But this is a big game. They got to win this one. Last week wasn't must win against the Patriots, but this one probably is. You gotta go into your bye week 4-1 because you have a very, I don't want to call it a very easy schedule, but your next stretch of 6 games have some very beatable opponents on it, and you got to win all you can before you go into the last 6 games of the season. And next up, we have the year's very first Tank Bowl between the Arizona Cardinals and the Cincinnati Bengals. I didn't think Cincinnati was going to beat the Steelers on Monday Night Football, but I also didn't think they would look that inept either, because oh my god, that was bad. I mean, that was just giving up on your season if ever I saw one. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, I mean, I gotta tell you, I've been standing up to you up to this point. I've been making the case that you can get better and maybe be competitive around the end of the year, but if you keep playing games that way, I'm going to stop making excuses for you at a point. That being said, you're playing the Bengals, who look like one of the worst teams in football right now and have been siphoned of any fight and competitiveness that their Week 1 performance promised in Seattle. If there was ever a winnable game for the Arizona Cardinals, it is this one. Everything the Bengals had going for them heading into Monday night's game was non-existent against Pittsburgh. The passing attack was completely taken away. The solid pass rush that they have on defense, non-factor, didn't even get close to putting pressure on Mason Rudolph. I'm going to pick the Cardinals again, but this is your last chance, Cardinals. If you let me down again, that's it. I'm done. I'm off the train. This is the game you have to show me something. Now go get it done, boys. Next up, we have the Patriots and Redskins.
You serious?
Next is the Steelers taking on the Ravens at home, so that's something. Steelers are coming off a win against the Bengals, but I mean, it's the Bengals, so let's not get carried away just yet, Steelers fans. But the Ravens are looking very vulnerable right now after getting slapped around last week by Cleveland. I'm officially raising the red flag on this Baltimore defense now, because they got destroyed by the Browns. It's one thing when you give up a lot of points and a lot of yards to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, but when you get carved up that way against the Browns, that is some cause for concern. However, I'm still not sold on Mason Rudolph and this Pittsburgh team. They can beat the Bengals with wildcat offenses, but that's the only team you're going to beat that way in 2019. Their running attack looked good, and Mason Rudolph didn't have a bad game, but if you look at that game, it was checkdowns till kingdom come, and the Bengals just had no answer for it. They couldn't stop anything in that game. So I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on Mason Rudolph. I want to see them kind of open up the playbook for him a little bit and actually see him, let him take some shots downfield before I start to judge him. Because really, you could not have been more conservative with how he played, with how you called that game for him on offense. And this is a much bigger test for him than last week was, because the Ravens, they're not Cincinnati. They can beat teams like Pittsburgh, and I think the Ravens will bounce back and win this game. Next up, we have the Bears and the Raiders, the first London game of the season. I still do not know how the Raiders were able to beat up so badly on the plucky Colts team, but you got to give them credit. It was a good win. It was a very good win. And if the season ended today, surprisingly, the Raiders would be in the playoffs right now as the last wild card team, as would the Bills, by the way, at 3-1. But the season does not end today, and I don't think the Raiders are staying in the playoffs for very long, mainly because they're facing a brick wall of a defense with a pass rush that is literally eating offensive linemen and pooping out quarterbacks. Khalil Mack is a actual bear trapped inside of a human's body. I like the Bears in this matchup very much. The Raiders went up against a Colts defense that isn't great. The Bears defense is great, so I think they win this game. Next up is the Broncos versus the Chargers. So the Chargers cashed in their coupon for one free win last week when they faced the Dolphins. Although you were the first team this season to trail the Dolphins, so I don't really know what that says about your team. Nevertheless, you got the win, and pretty easily, I might add. So you got your free win, and now you have a slightly better but equally unwatchable Broncos team coming up. I literally want to kill myself every time I watch the Broncos try to move the football on offense. Of course, the Chargers also have some big holes on their offense. Keenan Allen seems to be the only wide receiver capable of making any plays. I'm still not sold on this Chargers team. They gotta start playing a little more consistently. Nevertheless, I think they win this game. I think it's going to be ugly, and anyone forced to watch this game should have a loved one call them every once in a while just to make sure they're okay. And next up we have America's Game of the Week. A matchup between two 3-1 teams. The Green Bay Packers head to Jerry World to take on the Cowboys. Both these teams coming off some pretty tough losses. Dallas's offense took a major step back after a great start to the season. Now they have to play a Packers defense whose defense took a major step back again after a great start to the season. I like the game for the Packers. They've had good success over the Cowboys in years past. Cowboys, I think, are in a bit of a tougher spot than the Packers, though, because they got completely shut down by a Saints defense that had been struggling up to this point. And they're now facing a Packers defense that had been pretty solid all season and looking to bounce back after a down performance against the Eagles. Aaron Rodgers and this offense also finally managed to put together a strong 60 minutes in that Thursday night loss. And Dallas's defense, while they're good and they make plays, have been prone to allowing some big plays on offense. I'm very much looking forward to watching this game. Between the two teams, I think the Packers need this game more because they're facing much tighter competition in that division right now, with the Lions and the Vikings right behind them. Cowboys also have the Eagles and the Giants of all teams right behind them at 2-2, so this game could have very big playoff implications for both teams. I'm just going to go on a gut feeling here, and I'm going to say the Packers win. And that brings us finally to the Sunday night game where the Chiefs host the Indianapolis Colts. Colts, what the hell was that last week? I've been pulling for you all season, and you had a slam dunk last week against a struggling Raiders team, and you completely fell apart. I guess I didn't give enough weight to those defensive struggles you've been having because you got absolutely picked apart by Derek Carr, which is a problem because if the Raiders can do that against your defense, then you're in for a long night against Kansas City. You're also in a position now where this game against Kansas City is almost a must-win, especially in a division where all four teams are tied with the same record. And I don't need to say anything about the Chiefs. I mean, we all know how great they are. They're well coached. Their offense is phenomenal. Their defense still a little streaky, but they get stops when they need. They've gotten big stops when they've needed them, and it's hard to see them losing this game. I'm not ready to jump ship on the Colts because I still believe in this team, but this is still a big ask. Coming off of a tough loss last week, I think the Chiefs are going to win. And lastly, we come once again to another Monday Night Football game where the Cleveland Browns take on the 49ers, who are coming off their bye week. I really want the Browns to win this game because all season, while the Bills were 3-0 and the Niners were also 3-0, they've been saying over at the NFL Network that the Niners were the better team than the Bills and that the Niners were a much more trustworthy, undefeated team than the Bills. And I really don't want them to be right. My personal fandom aside, though, I'm still not sold on this 49er team. You can say what you want about the Bills' first 3 games, but the Niners' first 3 games were not that much more difficult than the Bills. That being said, though, I'm not sure how on board I am with this Browns team either. I give them credit for a great win on the road against Baltimore, and Baker Mayfield had far and away his best game of the season. But he's going to have to put a few of those games together if people are going to start jumping back on the Baker Mayfield bandwagon. I am also concerned of how this Browns O-line matches up against a 49er pass rush that has been very good to start this season. Jimmy Garoppolo has only had one genuinely good performance in those first 3 wins of the season, in my opinion, and he's coming off a game where he turned the ball over 3 times against the Steelers. I'm going to wish pick the Browns here because I do not want the Niners to go longer as an undefeated team than the Bills did. So I'm going to pick the Browns to win this game just because I want it to happen. And if I wish it so and I pick it on this show, then hopefully it'll just happen. It'll all work out. Although if last week is anything to go off, it probably won't because I had a bad week last week in these picks. I don't even think I got half the games right last week. But that's it. That's all the Week 5 games to go through this week. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win? Do you agree with my picks? Or do you think I'm a big dumb poopy head? Enjoy the games this week. And as always, have a blessed week, and we will see you in the next video. And as always, go Bills!